All right, so what do you consider when you're looking at a particular path? The first thing is line of sight. Do you have it? I would suggest that one of the first things you do physically is look at each site or look at the path from each site. Make sure you don't have very tall trees in the way or even buildings underneath the path. As we get more through this presentation, you'll see about the Fresnel zone of licensed links. And this becomes very important as well, along with clear line of sight. But other things to consider, long links over water can present some problems or challenges due to multipath interference. So as the signal bounces off the water, it can either combine at the antenna to increase your signal, or it can be out of phase, hit the antenna at the same time, and completely block out the signal that you're expecting. If you're near the coast, this might change based on tides, or even a storm passing over, chopping up the water may improve things. Over long distances across a desert, you might get what's known as ducting, and this is where different air masses of different densities lie in striations, I think is the word, through the atmosphere. And they act just like waveguide. So you might send your signal between your two antennas, and you have this this layer of air that basically is acting like a waveguide, and it sends your signal right over your antenna. So in cases like that, you'll hear space diversity to improve reliability of links, long links particularly, over very flat surfaces. The idea with space diversity is that as this ducting occurs, it bends the signal down to a second receive antenna. And then the processing of particular radios will know which of the two antennas is getting the better signal and take that one. You can also combine the two signals. That's going into some other technologies. Other things to consider. Are you going to put your antennas, or rather your radios, indoors? And if so, what's your transmission line and how long is it? If you use 100 feet of 6 gigahertz waveguide, there's going to be signal loss through that waveguide. At 6 gigs, it's going to be fairly minimal. If it's at 18 gigahertz, you may have a problem that can't be overcome through larger antennas or more powerful radios. So then it might make sense to put the ODU right on the antenna rather than inside a building. Right, other things to consider, if you increase the antenna size, can your structure support it? Okay, these are all the things that we can help with and present to you so that you have the information to make an informed decision on what to use, how to use it. The next most important thing is rain fade, the rain region where you're deploying these links. Out here in the West, we have basically perfect conditions for microwave. But in Florida and the Gulf states, maybe not so much. Here we might be able to use 18 gigahertz for a 10-mile link. In Florida, Georgia, Texas, some of those areas, the only frequency you probably would consider is 6 gigahertz for any length of link. Maybe 11 gigahertz if it's short enough. And that's because of the severe rain fade that's associated with basically any frequency above 10 gigahertz. Eastern Washington, Eastern Oregon, awesome places, Montana, Colorado, Utah, basically all through the West is very good. So you can see these, I don't know why it's in such order, but B and F are the best. E is the worst in terms of rain fade effects, or rather how often it rains and how heavily it rains throughout a year. So this is a model known as the Crane model. It's probably one of the best, and it's been compiled from data that's been gathered over a few decades. And the Pathlox program and other programs use the algorithms that Crane came up with to calculate rain fade. The world is also split up into these rain regions. We're not so concerned in this class about the rest of the world, but it follows a general rule and path. You can see that through equatorial regions, you get very heavy rainfall like you would expect, and so those are coded as the most severe. Okay, so how do you overcome rain fade, or any fading for that matter? You build into the system gain, and you get that through a couple of different ways. Transmit power of the radios, antenna gain, and receive sensitivity. So perhaps the easiest might be antenna gain. The bigger the antenna, the more gain. But then you have other considerations. They become very expensive as they get larger in size. Your structure has to support something that's bigger, heavier, creates much more wind loading. But the idea in designing a link is to build in enough fade margins so that you have an acceptable predicted reliability number. And that may vary based on your particular needs, a particular customer, or what your path is serving. In this example, you can see in the right-hand corner how rain has affected a particular link, right? All the way down to about, at the maximum, 55 dB of fade. That's huge. That's essentially all of the signal available on this particular link. So one way to overcome that, again, is antenna gain. Another way are techniques in the radio, like ACM, automatic coding and modulation. This is the ability of the radio to rate shift down in modulation. As you rate shift down, you increase your receive sensitivity. That's the ability of the radio to hear a lower signal, which adds system gain. So as the rain fade occurs, the radio rate shifts down. One effect is that you lose throughput, but it's better to have something than nothing at all. So in all licensed links, we recommend that you get the link licensed for ACM. You have to do this in the license versus just a set modulation. So you'll get it licensed for ACM, the radio rate shifts down. At the same time, the newer radios are now capable of also increasing power as the modulation decreases. A basic design consideration of any wireless system is as you increase the modulation, the radio needs a much cleaner signal to demodulate the information. If you're pumping lots of power through the transmitter, that tends to distort the signal. So that at higher modulations, typically the power has to be reduced. So you have this range of power and modulation, and as the modulation goes down, you can increase the transmit power and again increase the overall system gain of the link to keep it alive. Any questions on that so far? Fairly simple concept, I think. How it's done, I have no idea. I don't design this stuff, but
if that's an 18 gigahertz link, then with that ACM, will it actually go down to a different gigahertz frequency?
No, the frequency always stays the same.
Okay.
The channel size always stays the same. That's what you're being licensed for. So what will happen is just the modulation will be reduced. One thing about the Trango radios as well. Underneath even this very minimal throughput, the radio has a communication going on. So each end of the link is talking to the other side saying, do you need to rate shift down? How far are you going to go? So before it even happens, the radios know what's going to happen on either end. This is called hitless adaptive modulation. So the radio will know in advance that it's going to rate shift down, and as a result, it won't try to send more data than the predicted path it's going to have after it rate shifts down. So it will store some of these packets in a buffer until it can get everything across. So that's what hitless adaptive modulation is. Very cool. And this happens both ways, right? It rate shifts down, and it also rate shifts up when it can maintain, again, the maximum. This is a real-time graph of what happens, and this can all be graphed through SNMP or the Triangle NMS, but it shows you the signal pretty steady until it starts to rain, and then you can see it start to rate shift down. In this case, it only went down, what, 4 dB, something like that. Probably would not cause the link to even, if it was engineered correctly, probably not cause the link to even stutter. It could handle this and more. And where it rate shifts, we'll see later in a table of receive sensitivities. That's how the radio decides when it needs to rate shift down, based on RSL and what's known as MSE, mean squared error.
I don't know why I didn't think about putting my rain gauge on the same cacti graph as my signal. That would be kind of smart, you know, as rain falls.
Right.
So we've watched our adaptive modulation, and like we whip out the graph as soon as there's a big storm and go, did it do it? You know, and most of ours actually haven't done anything when the rain has fallen.
Yep.
These big drops are falling. Ours haven't really rate shifted.
Another thing about rain is that it's not going to be raining across this entire 13-mile path, hopefully. Right? If it does, then chances are the link might drop out completely. But you know, usually what's going to happen is this rainstorm is going to pass like this, or hopefully like this, rather than like this. So there's certain considerations. We have a customer in Indiana, and if their links are orientated, I forget whether it's north-south or east-west, those links have a much harder time because of the way the storms just move through their region.
It's the MSE. It's better the lower it gets, or better the higher it gets.
The lower it gets, it's a negative number. So MSE of neg 48 would be better than neg 40.
Okay.
So as this starts to increase, as it gets closer to 0, then things are getting worse. And that might be through a number of different reasons. Interference can affect MSE. Poor signal will affect MSE. It takes a couple of things into consideration. MSE is even, if you're using a split system, could show noise being coupled onto your LMR cable, or even your Cat6 or Cat5 cable. So you can plan links also with redundancy. John mentioned in some of these examples 1+0 links. That essentially means you have a single radio link between 2 points. You can also create along that same path a 1+1 or a 2+0. In terms of equipment, a 1+0 and a 2+0 are going to be nearly identical in most cases. I prefer, actually, if you're going to create a redundant link, why not create a 2+0 to double the bandwidth, as well as building in redundancy. 1+1 basically means you have 2 radios going through one antenna with one link on standby. So if the main link goes down for whatever reason, the standby link is on, ready to go, and it starts transmitting.
It's failover, yeah.
Yeah, it's failover. It takes per side 1 antenna, a combiner, and 2 radio links or 2 radio heads. The 2+0 is the same thing: 1 antenna, a combiner, and 2 radios. But now you have the option or the advantage of doubling your throughput. Or if it's a very long link, maintaining a certain throughput over 2 links that you could run both at lower modulations to increase your system gain. So there's many advantages with 2+0. The idea is to keep the link just rock solid, bulletproof, I guess you would call it. Preview the next slide. How come the picture's not show? There we go. So that was figuratively speaking, bulletproof.
Nice.
They're not always bulletproof though. And sorry, this is not covered under warranty.
It's not a manufacturer defect.
That link didn't stay up.
No, that
You know, there's honestly there's actually a Belcore GR standard for actually taking a 12 gauge shotgun blast at a certain distance. You've seen the labs that they want to test that stuff in, like equipment attached to a utility pole.
Yeah.
Do they have such a thing for a high powered rifle?
Not rifle.
Yeah.
It's a 10 or 12 gauge shotgun blast.
I assume they do have something though for electrical strikes, right?
I suppose. Yeah, there's some
Any-
standards, although
Anything that takes a direct strike is screwed anyway.
even a near strike, and that can be totally hit and miss. You know, it might a tower might get struck and 3 pieces of gear get taken out, everything else is fine, or maybe 90% of the gear gets taken out and everything else is okay. So yeah, lightning is something strange. I don't think anyone really understands that.
Depends on what path it takes.
Right. Yeah. All right. So still along path planning. How much throughput do you want, and at what reliability? As you move up the throughput scale, we're moving to the lower right-hand corner in terms of channel size increasing and modulation also increasing. Right, until we get to a maximum of between, let's just call it around 500 megabits per second, full duplex. But if your link only need 100 megabits per second, then you might consider licensing a smaller channel. Or using, if it's a very long link, let's say you use a larger channel but much lower modulation. So you increase your receive sensitivity but still maintain 100 megabits per second. Right, so this matrix is on the data sheet of every radio, and between the Lynx and the Orion, it's pretty much the same exact values. So based on this, we can help determine what your license should be, what your channel size, modulations, and so on should be. Right, the slide that goes along with this then is receive sensitivity. As you increase the modulation, the radio needs more of a signal and a cleaner signal. So again, these are negative numbers, so this is a higher value than this is, right? 20 dB, or 19 in this case. So the radio is looking for a much stronger signal as you increase the throughput. These are things to consider. How are you going to get that stronger signal? If it's a 20-mile link and we have to use 18 gigahertz, well, you may not be able to maintain the maximum throughput, or you might have to use 6-foot antennas. A better frequency might be 11 gigahertz or 6 gigahertz even. Right? As we come down in frequency, the signal tends to propagate better. It has less free space loss. This is just the signal fading across distance, basically. And lower frequencies tend to do better than higher frequencies. Additionally, lower frequencies are less affected by rain fade. Right? So a longer distance, you'll want to use a lower frequency. However, lower frequencies are also more susceptible to multipath fading. They have a larger Fresnel zone, and so these are considerations, right? And somewhere in all that mix is a happy medium that meets a number of factors: reliability, cost, and so on.
Then that's since that's dB, that's inverse to the MSE reading.
MSE,
Because you want a lower number for MSE.
That's right.
But you want a higher number
for your signal.
okay.
Yep.
That's what was throwing me off when I first was using your GUI. I was like, what's going on there? So,
Yes.
okay.
That's it. So this is one of the numbers also plugged into the program that determines the reliability numbers. It's part of system gain. And speaking of system gain, when you have a radio that has comparatively higher power at various modulations and better receive sensitivity, you can use this to your advantage in either longer distances with the same reliability or set distances with smaller antennas for the same reliability. I'm not sure why we have this many slides for this.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So, is there any truth to the statement that if you have a license link and you have a dish of a smaller than 6 foot, that you can be bumped on your license band? Like,
Yes,
that if you go hang a
certainly.
6 foot or bigger dish, they can't come by and, I mean, you know, because we talked about, where's John? You know, that, okay, it's licensed, we're protected, we go home, we go fishing, we've got this band, and you know, that somebody can come along and go, well, I'm going to hang a bigger dish and knock you off. I mean, I just want to know, what's the truth to that? Is it real?
The truth is, at certain frequencies, there does exist the potential that you have to change an antenna size if it doesn't meet a certain specification. So the FCC recently allowed dishes in 6 gig all the way down to 3 foot. Before it had to be 6 foot only. And those meet what's known as category A patterns, right? Very tight beam widths, side lobe suppressions that meet certain specifications. This is all to be basically good neighbors, right? And to better use the available spectrum. But they allowed now smaller antennas at both 6 and 11 gigahertz. At 6 gig, you can use all the way down to a 3 foot antenna, which is great because now it really opens up the 6 gig spectrum. But if things get at a particular site, let's say, very congested and they want to put more frequencies in, the FCC may come by and say, hey, we need to free up some spectrum, so your 3 foot dish has to change to a 6 foot dish. It's also the same thing at 11 gig. If you use a 2 foot or a 3 foot antenna, they have the option to come by and say, we need you now to install a 4 foot antenna, which meets the certain specifications at 11 gigahertz. I've never seen it happen.
It's just theoretical if they could.
That's right.
Okay,
Yeah, I've
but
never
it's not.
seen that.
It's not like we're seeing people that have got a bigger dish bumping people. That's okay.
No.
Okay.
No. As a matter of fact,
The way we read it, we just weren't really sure.
if I had a link at 6 gig with 3 foot antennas and you came by and wanted to use a 6 foot antenna, that's better for both of us. Let's say you could use a 3 foot antenna in that spot, but you want a 6 foot. That's up to you, and that's actually a better thing to do.
Yeah.
Okay, so path profiles are very important. These will tell you a couple of things, and we can do many things to the path profile. This one's pretty neat because it's going to have very little chance of any type of multipath interference, right? We have this Fresnel zone, but also the rays coming out of this antenna basically go off in every direction. Right? It's a dish, and while it has a main beam that's very tight and patterns of side lobes, these side lobes will radiate out, and over distance, the rays start to hit and bounce off of things. So this is a good example because anything that comes down here hits this, the angle of what's it called? Incidence is the same as the angle of I forget the other name, but anyway, it hits this. and bounces off. So it's being directed completely away from your receive antenna. The same thing here. It might come like this. It hits this and goes straight up, so on and so forth. So this is an example of a very nice path profile. You probably also are not going to get much ducting from a path like this as well. There's not a whole lot of area where the striations can be created, except maybe way down here where the cold air is going to settle into this valley and settle into this valley. But your link's not even touching that, so it doesn't become an issue. Right? The red line along this profile indicates the bore side of the antennas. Right? Perfect center to center of the antenna beam width. The blue line is the Fresnel zone. This becomes very important, especially over longer links or anywhere that you might have something underneath your path that may encroach on this Fresnel zone. The Fresnel zone is a factor of frequency. It's inversely related to frequency. And it's also a factor of distance. So the lower in frequency you go, the larger the Fresnel zone becomes. The longer distance you go, the larger the Fresnel zone becomes. It has nothing to do with the antenna pattern. If you have a 1 degree beam width on an antenna versus a 3 degree beam width, the Fresnel zone is still going to be the same size. This is a fairly short link, 14 miles. But when you start to talk about very long links, we have to consider earth curvature. Right? This is 220 kilometers. This is an actual link between Cyprus and Lebanon. And luckily they have pretty high peaks on each side. This is at 6 gigahertz. The Fresnel zone looks pretty tiny, but that's because the link is 180 miles long. Right? So the scale of this picture is a little bit deceiving. If we take a look at it, the Fresnel zone is actually, you go from here, that's 1,000 to 1,200. The Fresnel zone might be something like 500 feet wide at its center. The profile is presented as a two-dimensional picture, right? And so in order to see what the earth curvature looks like, this orange line is added. So this is what the link is actually has to overcome as it goes this 220 miles. Another thing I found interesting, especially with very flat links that are great distances, if you look at the earth curvature, your towers, instead of looking like this, are going to look like that, right, as the earth curves. So the angle of the antennas are actually pointing down on each side of this very long link over flat land because of earth curvature. There's how many links across this path? There's half a dozen?
Yeah.
Nearing a dozen probably. It's pretty cool.
Wow.
We have 3 different customers, all with a 2+0 links and so forth along this path. Here's a little better picture of what a Fresnel zone looks like. It's actually a football shape that's narrower at the ends than it is in the middle. And it's 360 degrees. So not only do you have to be considered or take into consideration what's under the path, but also what's on the side. If you're shooting down a long corridor in a city, you might have buildings on the side that impact the Fresnel zone as well. Typically, it's okay to impact the Fresnel zone by 20%. So you could have something covering, coming into this up to 20% of the Fresnel zone. We generally don't recommend anything that gets in the way at all, unless it's very minimal. So we're always looking for 100% Fresnel zone clearance when we engineer these paths. And your path report is going to look something like this. So you will generally give us the coordinates, or maybe send us a KMZ where we can pull the coordinates off a Google Earth file, something like that. If you don't know the antenna heights, or you're just wondering if the link is going to work, we can ask the program to suggest the optimal antenna heights. But in that case, it takes only the ground level into consideration. So if we go back a couple slides here, it's not going to know, for instance, that there are 100-foot trees along this path. So that's something very important for you to let us know, because we can add that to the program and show you what it looks like with those 100-foot trees along the bottom of the path. Or, hey, 2 miles out, there's a very large warehouse that's 30 feet high, and I have to shoot over it. Will I have a problem with that? This will help us determine that. So the output of the report is basically shows you everything you need, and as a matter of fact, this information is sent to the license coordination company. Right? It gives them all the information they need as well. We have the site names, the coordinates. This is very important. Make sure when we're doing this, to the best of your ability, you give us the most accurate coordinates. Sometimes it causes confusion if we submit something where it's off and the coordinator has already that site on record, and they say, well, we already have this under a certain call sign with different coordinates. Which ones should we use? So then we have to come back to you, well, what are the coordinates? Is this or that? Do you want to use the same call sign? Whatever. So it's important to know up front, to the best of your ability, the most accurate coordinates. We'll put in the antenna size based on maybe your restrictions. I have a Roam 25 tower that can only accept a 2-foot antenna. Or I'm on top of a building, I can put anything, whatever. So we'll take that into consideration. And then the antenna heights. The frequency, this shows you what frequency we're at. And also free space loss and any other losses associated with the link. And then down here, transmit power of the radios, the radio type, and your expected signal. The same document you might use to align your link and make sure you're getting the signal that's been predicted here. And then finally, this is all calculated with rain fade and rain regions and so forth to come up with a annual predicted reliability. In this case, we have 5 9s and a 5, which equates to 150 seconds per year of predicted downtime. Now, it's very important to note that this 150 seconds of downtime is only at this particular setting, right? 40 megahertz wide channel, next 79 is going to be, what, 32 QAM?
Yeah.
Something like that, 16 QAM. So the radio will not be able to maintain that setting for 150 seconds in a year. And that might be 3 seconds here, 10 seconds there, whatever. Highly doubtful it's going to be 150 seconds all at one time. But if it is, that's not that big of a deal. So this link has been engineered for a specific throughput and a specific reliability. If we wanted more throughput, this number would go down because then we would need more fade margin. Our receive signal is going to stay the same because we, well, maybe not. If we have to go too high in modulation, then our power might come down, which will affect our receive signal. But let's say it stays the same, and we increase the modulation, we're going to need the receive level is then going to increase, right? It's going to need more signal strength, which leaves less fade margin. And here's our fade margin that we have to deal with. So this link is not going to rate shift down until it sees 35 dB of fade. So that's path loss, very powerful tool. We can modify it to your specifics. So let us do it. It's a lot of fun to do, and the results are highly accurate. Another source that you can use yourselves is Trango's free Path Check app. If you have an iOS device, I would suggest downloading this. It's really handy. You can even take a picture and get the coordinates right where you are if you have it in the field, or you can bring up a map and place pins, and it will populate the fields with the coordinates. It's a handy tool to find out right away if you're going to have maybe a line of sight issue and reliability. So, for instance, if you're out at a customer site and you're proposing a license link, right then and there you could tell them, well, yeah, it looks like this is going to work, and we might be dealing with X reliability. If we use this frequency, oh, you can only use 2-foot antennas, let me change to something else, and on the fly you can change all of these specifications. There's two different modes. The quick calc, actually I use a lot while I'm on the phone with customers, in particular when it comes to 24 gig links. As John mentioned, 24 gigahertz is restricted to fairly low transmit power. In the US, it's -3 dBm. So I just helped a customer yesterday in Galveston who wanted to establish a 150 megabit link over 4.2 miles with 24 gigahertz. The application told me that with 2-foot antennas, there's no way that he can go to 1024 QAM, right? So on the phone, we discussed his different modulation levels that would be available with 2-foot antennas. That's the quick calc. The path profiles essentially gives you everything that PathLoss gives us. Very handy, and actually quite a powerful tool, especially for being free. It's pretty neat. So I highly encourage you to load it if you have an iPad or an iPhone or whatever. Just one word of, not really warning, but notation. At 6 gigahertz and 11 gigahertz, it's a little optimistic when it comes to multipath fading. So for those frequencies, I would use it just to make sure you have clear Fresnel and a clear line of sight. And then you can always hit the email button, send it right to sales@Trango, and we'll run a path through PathLoss if you'd like. Or we can even quote based right off of this result here. So it helps us as well. All right, so we've gone through all the path. We know what we're going to use for frequencies, antenna size, modulation. You're happy with what we presented and what we've suggested. Now it's time to get the link licensed. The first step is frequency coordination, and Trango can assist with this. We subcontract through a company called Raydyne. They've been doing this for years and years and years. They know what they're doing. It's their job to make sure that what we are asking for, we can get. And if we can't get it, then they'll let us know what's available. So part of the coordination process is to identify frequencies, reserve those frequencies, and let us know if there's any other special circumstances. For instance, if we want to use a particular channel size with the antennas that we've chosen, it may not be available simply because the antennas won't allow us to sneak into this particular place. So they may say, well, if you want it, you have to use these ultra high performance antennas. Or we might say, we want a link in a particular subband because you have a pair of radios on hand that you want to reuse, 11 gigahertz or 6 gigahertz. And they'll check to make sure that those frequencies are actually available.
Does Raydyne do anything with the antenna? I mean, are they doing their own version of PathLoss of some kind, or they're doing their own cross check of all the numbers to make sure it's legit?
Yeah, it's actually even much more involved because PathLoss is only looking at our particular link. Their programs, and each of the coordinators, I think, have developed their own program that takes into consideration a number of factors based on all the licenses that are out there that they gather from the FCC database. So they'll look at links around you, including the antenna size of everybody else's links, their frequencies, their modulations, their transmit power, and their program puts all that in to see if your link is going to interfere with them, or vice versa. And if so, then they move frequencies, whatever. So yeah, they have much more involved programs. Oh, just one thing. I noticed here, coordination per path. In a 2+0 link, that's considered 2 paths. So the coordination fee is paid twice for those, but the licensing fee is only paid once. The FCC considers an endpoint a one-time charge. And if you license 10 links from that one point at one time, you pay only once for that endpoint, versus if you came back 10 different times and set up all these licenses, then you pay each individual time off that one point. Here are our license band frequencies in the US. 6 gig, 7, which is considered broadcast, and 13, these are pretty specialized because they're only available if there's not what they call a TV pickup license in place. So these were frequencies that were vacated by broadcasters by a certain time, but in rural areas, they still have TV pickup licenses. Actually, just the opposite. In highly populated areas, there are still TV pickup licenses. And these are, you've seen the trucks with the booms, the broadcast trucks. That's their licenses that they get to use. So as long as they hold those licenses, you can't license in these frequencies. They come in handy in a few places, but it has to be very rural. And in those cases, pretty much everything's going to be open anyway, so not much of an advantage there. So we have 6 gig, 7, 11, 13, 18, and 23. At 6 and 11 and 23, there are various subbands that should be taken into consideration, or at least know about. The radios, I think it comes down to a performance issue, but it's tough to get a radio to cover a very broad spectrum, especially if the TR spacing is tight. So what they've done is split up these subbands, or split up these chunks of spectrum into various subbands. And the radios then cover just portions of the entire spectrum. So if you get a license in subband 3 at 6 gig, and you have a pair of subband 4 radios on hand, it's not going to work. You have to get new radios. In other frequencies like 11, if you want the largest channel, they put you in the highest frequencies first. So subband 7, subband 6. These are just things to consider for 1 or 2 links, your first link, or if there's really no issue, you don't really have to worry about it. If you start to get multiple links and you're looking now at carrying spares, then it becomes critical, because you want to make sure that all your 11 gig links are in the same subband. So you can carry just one set of spares that could be placed in any of your locations. Same with 6 and 23. 18 gig, one subband, pretty awesome, doesn't matter. One set of radios can be held as spares for multiple 18 gig links. Additionally, at I think at 23 gig, there's an option that you can take advantage of, which is conditional authority to install the link. Once you pay for the license application, then the FCC allows you to install the link and turn it on before you get your actual license from the FCC. But at 23 gigahertz, certain subbands don't allow that, and certain EIRP limits don't allow that. You have to be wary of those. And these are things that we can help with determining and understanding. We are only concerned with ANSI system spacings. This is the amount of frequency between your transmit and your receive frequencies. So, or between your two transmit frequencies, if you want to look at it that way. At 18 gigahertz, that spacing, TR spacing, transmit receive spacing, is 1560 megahertz. So if you're at 18 gigahertz on one side, your other side is going to be transmitting at 19560. That's where the full duplex comes in, and that's to ensure that the two radios are not interfering with each other. I mentioned conditional authority. That comes with the payment to the FCC for your license application, which is known as the 601 form. This is basically the winding down of the coordination process. The coordinator will take our path analysis information. They'll create what's known as a client approval notice. This looks almost like a path analysis report, but now it's got frequencies that have been identified. This is your chance to take a look at all the information, make sure that the coordinates are right, that we're using the right gear, the right antennas. If there's any issue with that, you let us know, we'll let the coordinators know. That's the time to make changes for your proposed license. After the client approval notice is approved, then it goes into PCN. And the PCN is the same document, but now it's sent out to every license holder that's within a 150-mile radius of either of your endpoints. This allows them the chance to compare it with their links and determine if there will be any interference issues. It's not the option for them to say no just because they want to say no. They have to prove a point if they are saying no to your link. Right? They have to prove an interference issue. If the coordinator has done their job correctly, then that will not come up. It has come up, but that's it seems to be extenuating circumstances, like very old licenses that have outdated coordinates that have never been updated. So it can occur. Jeff is victim to that, unfortunately. We had licensed for them a 60 megahertz wide channel, particular frequency, and then at the very end of the process, somebody said something about it, and so they had to change frequencies. But there wasn't another 60 meg channel available. They had to go to a 30 meg XPIC. But now that messes up the antenna choice, so there can be some ramifications.
Until you pay the FCC fee, don't think you've got that baked.
That's the point. If you have the time, a lot of people go as soon as the PCN is issued.
Yeah.
They want us to ship the gear because they're under a time constraint, and it can bite you. But the chances of it happening are very slim. Jeff's case is the third.
I found the slim one.
Yeah, third in about how many frequencies do you think we've done? Thousands. It is a very, very small chance.
But as the spectrum is getting more crowded, I think it's going to be more common.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think so too. So as a general rule of thumb, you may want to wait until you actually pay for the 601 documents. At that point,
everyone's had their opportunity to yell at the wedding altar.
That's right.
Yeah.
And they'll have a much harder chance if they come back after that fact and say, wait a minute. So, you'll see also the licensing fees are not really that expensive. If this is a new call sign, you'll pay $470. I think it may have gone back up to $490, but it fluctuates a little bit. 485 maybe?
485. I think it's 485 and 285.
Okay. They keep changing it, but it rarely goes any higher than $500. That's per site. And that fee is paid once for 10 years. So you get the license for 10 years. At the end of the 10 years, you can renew the license. And I think it's just a modification fee at that point, so $270. If you have an established call sign and you're adding another link, then you just pay a modification fee to the call sign. Now it's your option if you want to create a new call sign from the same point or keep the call sign and just add to it. There's, I'm sure, some advantages and disadvantages to both. If you're helping a enterprise customer that happens to be a municipality, state government, something like that, they do not pay the licensing fees. But you, as the installer or whatever, the licensor still has to pay the coordination fee. That's a separate entity. Enterprise business that does that. So that's the final step. You're pretty much done, ready to go. The whole process takes anywhere between 30 and 45 days until you get the 601 documents to pay for. Sometimes they can even be sped up to 2 weeks. We can request an expedited PCN. The coordinator mentions this to all the other people that they send the PCN to, but it's not a hard rule. They don't have to accept your expedite request, and they can take the full 4 weeks, which is the hard set time frame.
Is there a cost associated with expedition?
Some coordinators charge extra for that, we do not. John mentioned that we will configure your links before they ship out of the factory, and we do that based on either the PCN or your actual 601 documents. So if we're a part of that process, we have all that information anyway, and we'll use that to set up your link in our lab and set the channel size, the modulation, the frequency for each side, and label them as such. So when you get it in your warehouse, you open it up, you look at the link configuration sheet, and it says this is side A with this frequency, this is side B with this frequency. That's very important because there's a high side radio and a low side radio, and they're not interchangeable. So if you set them up incorrectly, then you are operating outside of your license and can be subject to $10,000 a day fine for operating outside of your license. The chance of somebody finding that out is probably very slim, but it's just another step we take to help ensure that your link is successful and that you're operating within your license. So you'll get the sheets, you'll determine which one goes where. At that point, once you align the antennas, everything should be set and ready to go. That's it. The PCN is helpful for us as well. I mentioned earlier about certain spectrums having different subbands. We can't actually process an order for 6 gig, 11 gig, and 23 gig links until we know the frequency, so we know which subband radio to enter into our system. So it's a very important document for us to have as well. Sky River does their own licensing. So they'll just send us a PCN and say, we want to order this gear. At that point, they know they've got everything good to go. We just fulfill an order, ship it. They set it up. If we do the whole process, then we're a little more intimately involved, and we've got a pretty good idea of what frequencies are going to be used. So we might be able to get a jump start on certain aspects of it. And that is, I think that's it. Yeah. Do you have any questions?